property and life or damage to a foreign interest. So what's the threat assessment? Well, after the 11 September terrorist attacks in the U.S., there is now a real fear that terrorists could use a ship as a potential weapon. While in the past piracy usually involved the attackers coming on board a ship to steal money or valuable items of cargo, there is now evidence of involvement of organized crime with whole ships being stolen to order. Maritime piracy in the Indian Ocean is expected to decrease in the face of aggressive moves by the Indian Navy to expand patrols in the area. An overview of 10 years of targeted vessels shows that 77% of all reported maritime piracy incidents from 1992 to 2001 were against 4 types of ships: bulk carriers, containers, tankers, and general cargo ships. These categories constitute the majority of merchant vessels over 300 tons. We also have to look, too, at the potential of attacks against passenger ships. And as we discussed earlier, the Coast Guard's initial concerns post 9/11 were directed at cruise lines and how they might be attacked, both operating here in the United States and overseas. The greatest threat to U.S. vessels and passengers is common crime, however, particularly while in port. Crime related to maritime activities can take many forms, but the most serious of these is robbery and assault of passengers while touring foreign ports. Other threats to U.S. citizens and vessels include political or civil instability, maritime stowaways, and of course maritime activist groups, as we discussed. Crime, whether aboard ship or in port, poses the greatest threat to passengers on cruise ships and ferries around the world. Several popular cruise ship ports of call in the Caribbean and South America have very high rates of crime. For example, crime in Jamaica continues to be of significant concern to many of the U.S.-based cruise lines. In April 2001, 3 cruise lines announced their intent to withdraw all or most of their ships from Jamaican ports upon completion of their Caribbean tour that season due to increases in crime. Drug smuggling by both cruise line employees and passengers is an acknowledged problem the cruise lines are also combating. On 19 May 2001, U.S. Customs officials in Port Everglades, Florida, arrested 3 crew members of the Disney Magic after they were apprehended smuggling 3 kilos of cocaine strapped to their legs. 4 passengers were arrested by U.S. Customs at the same port on 19 November 2001 when 47 pounds of heroin were found strapped to their bodies after they had disembarked the Sun Princess. One incident that occurred to a cruise line that I directed security for occurred in Jamaica, where the ship was targeted by smugglers that were actually working through the government. In this case, prior to the ship being allowed to disembark its passengers and crew, we had to take on those government officials that were there to clear the vessel. You have immigrations and customs and others. On this particular case, a customs official came on board to establish that all of the shops were locked up. He came on board with his usual sample bag, which had charts and documents and what have you, but he asked on this occasion to just be left alone. He didn't need anyone to follow him through the vessel. This caught the ship by surprise, and one of the Gurkhas that we had assigned as a ship security officer elected to follow him as he made his rounds. And he noted that he entered a restroom on 7 deck. When he went in, the Gurkha said he never heard him flush the toilet, and he came out about 10 minutes later. So when he walked in, there was a single stall, and he looked behind the stall, and there was a plate above the toilet. And when he pulled that plate back, he found 13 kilos of heroin that had just been placed there by the customs official. This resulted in a number of arrests, but underscored, too, the potential that the very people that are there to protect your ship could also be vectors of attack for the ship as well. And scrutiny by the crew may be the only means by which you're going to prevent such an incident from affecting your ship, because the consequences may still likely fall on your shoulders, particularly when you're dealing with fines that might result from discovery of such drugs upon re-entry to the United States. In 2002, both Royal Caribbean and Disney Cruise Line acknowledged publicly that they were using drug-sniffing dogs in addition to U.S. Customs canine patrols. Let's shift now to looking at violent crime on board ferries. Because of the tight sailing times and the fact that passenger cars and commercial trucks are carried on board, ferries have a unique vulnerability profile, a fact known to both terrorists and criminals. On July 11, 1988, As we talked about earlier, the city of Poros, a day cruiser and ferry plying the islands off the Saronic Gulf, was attacked by grenade blasts and a fusillade of automatic weapons fire. For about 5 minutes, at least 4 members of the Abu Nidal organization raked the deck of the 688-ton vessel. They escaped overboard, leaving 9 people dead and 98 injured. It was really quite a maelstrom. And as you can see in the photograph here, people were scrambling to get off the deck, all the while explosions were being let off and people were being machine gunned to death. And in the melee, all of the terrorists were able to make their escape onto a boat that was waiting for them. Those that were injured or killed included members of a...
The focus of this course is on the characteristics and potential effects of prohibited weapons, explosives, hazardous substances, and compounds that pose a risk to ships and port facilities. The elements of this course include sections on recognition and detection of weapons, dangerous substances, and devices, methods of physical searches and non-intrusive inspections, implementing and coordinating searches, recognition on a non-discriminatory basis of persons posing potential security risks, techniques used to circumvent security measures, and crowd management and control techniques. This program is on the recognition and detection of weapons, dangerous substances, and devices. The focus of this session is on the characteristics and potential effects of prohibited weapons, explosives, and substances and compounds that pose a hazard to personnel, ships, and facilities, and related topics. For the port facility security officer, the company security officer, or the ship security officer to effectively discharge his or her duties, it is important that they be capable of recognizing common weapons, dangerous devices, and substances. After all, to defend against these items, one must have an appreciation for their size, capabilities, and limitations. Therefore, the course objectives for this program are to recognize, detect, and describe weapons, dangerous substances, and devices. List common bomb detonation devices. Describe the safe response when a suspected explosive device is located. And identify characteristics and behavior patterns of persons who may be likely to commit unlawful acts. Let's first look at the category of small arms. These range from centerfire weapons such as rifles and pistols to machine guns and even rocket-propelled grenades. Centerfire weapons include assault rifles and handguns and are called centerfire weapons because they fire a bullet that is housed in a cartridge with a center fire primer. A firing pin strikes the primer and ignites the gunpowder, which then propels the bullet down the barrel. While a program of this length cannot hope to introduce the student to the full array of weapons that they might encounter, representative centerfire weapons of concern include the AK-47 Kalashnikov 7.62 millimeter assault rifle. It has a range of 1,350 meters and has a cyclic rate of 600 rounds per minute. The M16 or Armalite 5.56 millimeter assault rifle. It has a range of 600 meters and a cyclic rate of 700 rounds per minute. The H&K Heckler & Koch MP5 9mm submachine gun. It has a range of 100 meters and a cyclic rate of 800 rounds per minute. Finally, the Colt .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. It has a range of 50 meters effectively and can fire from an 8-round magazine. Each of these types of weapons can be found in the possession of pirates, terrorists, or criminals around the world, and the photographs that you'll see in this presentation should be memorized so that you can effectively identify these should you encounter them in the future. Machine guns, usually firing large rifle caliber bullets such as the 7.62 millimeter or 50 caliber round, are typically used to attack vehicles or defensive positions that require a greater degree of penetration than that afforded by shoulder-fired rifles. Because of their powerful ammunition, these weapons can be extremely effective when directed against a ship. Pirates in the Far East are known to use such weapons mounted on the bow of their boats. An example would be the U.S. M60 7.62 millimeter medium machine gun. It has an effective range of 1,100 meters and has a cyclic rate of 550 rounds per minute. There's also the U.S. M2 Browning 50 caliber heavy machine gun.
It has a range in excess of 1,500 meters and has a cyclic rate of 550 rounds per minute. Rocket-propelled weapons, such as the shoulder-fired RPG-7, originally built in Russia, were for the most part originally designed as anti-tank. Incident response planning for a variety of contingencies associated with terrorism and other criminal activities that may arise in a maritime setting is the primary topic that is discussed in this course. This program will explore the appropriate actions to be taken in the event of a bomb threat, explosion, act of piracy, hijacking, or other event of similar magnitude. In addition, this course will help the student to prepare, manage, and learn from security exercises and drills. An emphasis is placed on learning that security plans rarely withstand a drill or exercise without significant changes. Specific elements of this course include emergency preparedness, emergency response, and contingency planning, security drills and exercises, and how to assess port and ship security drills and exercises. This program is concerned with incident response planning for a variety of contingencies associated with terrorists and other criminal activities that may arise in the maritime setting. Incident response planning associated with terrorism and other criminal activities that may arise in a maritime setting is one of the topics that will be discussed in this program. What follows is a cursory, yet systematic and effective model that is designed to walk you through some step-by-step considerations when developing a contingency plan for a specific environment. Develop a good understanding of the local threat, what emergencies and what contingencies you should be ready for. For example, local police may tell you that pickpockets immediately outside of the port are a particular problem. Determine the specific threats that are most likely to occur. That could be anything from car thefts to muggings, but in some regions of the world, it could also include a potential terrorist attack. Determine the training and resource needs that accompany this array of threats. For example, you may want to increase the patrols and the training associated with your guards. That might be working outside the perimeter fence, for example. Next, examine the current level of security personnel training, then compare it with the desired level of training. Seek out additional sources of information from federal, state, national, local law enforcement or intelligence, and maintain a firm understanding of the applicable regulatory requirements that must be met, as well as to what degree you must comply with those regulations. Let's look at some of the elements that are at risk. First, port facilities, ships, personnel, whether employees or civilians, as well as equipment found on board those ships or in those ports. Give wide-range consideration to these elements that we just mentioned during peacetime, mobilization, and times of conflict or war. And have a clear understanding of the roles and responsibilities of all personnel during attacks, emergencies, and other contingencies. This obviously is something that has to be reinforced with training and drills. Gather data and information relating to the possible risk. Incorporate any historical information into your plan, keeping in mind actions that resulted in successes and those that resulted in failures. That, after all, is the purpose behind training and exercises. Mimic what works. Reevaluate what has not worked and try to understand why it didn't work, whether it was the plan or the personnel or the fashion by which it was carried out. Be aggressive in looking for information and don't overlook dissimilar organizations that have similar problems. For example, the airlines may be dealing with a very similar problem to the one you're facing, and they've been doing this for many, many years. Wherever possible, use the resources of the industry and academic community, for example, the Maritime Security Council and other organizations that cater to the maritime industry may well have templates and guidance that can assist you in this process. And incorporate existing resources that have been proven effective. Next, you want to assemble a circle of confidants. Gather a core of these confidants to assist you in the planning process and meet with them regularly. This might be in the context of a port security committee, for example. A small group is usually most effective. Develop subgroups to provide specialized work. These subcommittees may look at the purchase of a piece of equipment or the training necessary to use it. Select associates for their competence, not their rank or position within an organization. Next, you want to review the data for its usefulness.
decide what is and is not useful, and use it. Keep a log of what information is used and what is not, and why. Draft the plan, test it, and then formalize its implementation. Begin the process of drafting the plan. At the beginning stage, the plan is likely just an outline that requires fleshing out, and this is where your committee may come in and be of assistance. Begin the process of testing your plan with a simple strategy. Test a small piece of the action to allow experimentation without any major disruptions within the environment, whether it's the ship or the port. Systematically work through the plan, step by step, and consider emergency management software to house your plans. It's important, remember, to have a solid information security program that will protect not only your software, the transmission of your data, but also any hard copy plans that might be developed. The idea behind an information security program is to make certain that you protect that information from the time of its creation, its dissemination, its receipt, storage, right to the time that it's destroyed. Next, you need to test, validate, and modify your findings. Develop a realistic, simple testing strategy and understand and incorporate the various methodologies for testing and validating a plan. Be watchful of opportunities to test the plan under semi-realistic conditions, such as the docking of passenger cruise ships, unloading of cargo ships, and screening of throughput. This can be of particular value to the given ship because they too have an obligation to test their plans. Take recent emergencies or threats and use these circumstances against your plan. Use hypotheses to test and determine what would happen if the incident were to occur again. Continuously update the plan and keep current with any new regulations coming down the pike. Remember, it's not only the regulations that you need to be aware of, but also any changes in threats or vulnerabilities that may have an effect on your operation. Now, let's talk about security drills and exercises. All security personnel should be proficient in their respective security duties at all the different security levels, 1, 2, and 3, as well as be able to identify any security-related deficiencies that need to be addressed. In order to achieve this level of awareness, it's necessary to effectively implement security drills and exercises in a comprehensive program. To comply with the Port Facility Security Plan or Ship Security Plan, these drills must be conducted at least once every 3 months unless the specific circumstances dictate otherwise. In addition, in cases where more than 25% of the ship's personnel have been changed at any one time, with personnel that have not previously participated in any drill on that ship within the last 3 months, a drill should be conducted within 1 week of the change. The drills need to be designed to test the various individual elements of the plan, such as damage to or destruction of the port facility or the ship. This might occur through an explosive device, an improvised explosive device, as we've talked about, arson, sabotage, or vandalism. The drill could include a hijacking or seizure of the ship or a person on board. You could drill regarding the tampering of cargo, essential ship equipment, or systems or ship stores. The discovery of stowaways or finding somebody on board who does not have authorized access is also a potential drill. The basis of a drill could also include the use of the ship to carry those intending to cause a security incident, or it could be the use of the ship itself as a weapon or a means to cause damage or destruction, blockage of a port entrance, for example, or locks or approaches to the port. And you can drill on the nuclear, biological, and chemical scenario where some sort of weapon of mass destruction might be placed on the ship or within a container that's being carried by the ship.
Whether conducting drills or operating at a heightened security level, the following
is verified, and this is going to be the responsibility of the ship's crew and/or officers. The port also has a duty associated with the delivery of ship stores. Quite obviously, the stores themselves could be tampered with while inside the perimeter of the port. Port facility security measures relating to the delivery of ship's stores should therefore ensure that the packaging integrity is checked before those stores are permitted on board a ship. Prevent ship stores from being accepted without inspection by the ship's crew. Prevent tampering with the stores once they've arrived within the port but prior to their delivery to the ship. Prevents ship stores from being accepted unless ordered. This requires somebody from the ship checking against the manifest for each item prior to being allowed onto the ship. Ensure delivery vehicles are screened and searched, and they should also have permits before they're allowed into the port. And ensure delivery vehicles are escorted within the port facility, and in particular when they enter onto the quayside. Now, let's look at the ship requirements associated with the delivery of ship stores under Security Level 1. These are the details that you need to have incorporated into your ship's security plan. There should be, for example, verification to ensure that stores coincide with the ship's request of goods before they're being loaded on board. This requires an actual physical inspection and a comparison made with the manifest on the quayside by ship's personnel. And there should be verification to ensure that cleared and inventory stores are secured. Now, duties associated with the port facility's delivery of ship stores under Security Level 1 should include verification of the ship's stores. Again, this is going to require communication between yourself and the ship's crew. Prior notification of the composition of a store's load, along with the driver and company's pertinent information and vehicle registration. When at all possible, you should confirm not only the vehicle, but also the name of the driver prior to that vehicle and driver being provided access into your designated restricted area. Search the delivery vehicle once it enters into the designated restricted area. Verification of ship stores can be accomplished by any of several means. Visual and physical examination, for example, is most common, but also employing scanning or other detection equipment to include mechanical devices and canine units, as we discussed previously. Now things are getting more serious, because as we approach Security Level 2, the ship's duties regarding the delivery of ship stores increase. When at Level 2, these include establishment of additional security measures during the delivery of ship stores, verification of stores prior to receiving them, and increasing the intensity and scope of the inspections. Now, for the port, when you reach Level 2, their duties relating to the delivery of stores should include detailed verification of the ship's stores, and this is going to occur through conversation with the ship's crew. Detailed screening and searches of the delivery vehicles. Coordinating with the ship's personnel to verify the order before allowing access into the port facility. Escort of the delivery vehicle within the port facility and in particular in the designated restricted area. Detailed verification of the ship's stores can be accomplished by increasing the frequency and scope of the visual and physical inspection of delivery vehicles, increasing the implementation and use of scanning or detection equipment, mechanical devices, and canine units, restricting or prohibiting entry of ship stores that are not designated to be transported or loaded at a specific time. With this increase in security level, you're also going to want to make better use of your scanning or detection equipment, any mechanical devices you may have, and the use of dogs should they be available. And restrict or prohibit the entry of ship stores that are not designated to be transported or loaded at a specific time. In other words, you don't want items coming in for some future use by a ship being warehoused within the port when you're operating at this security level. We can only hope that you're never going to reach Level 3, because as we know, this is the highest security level you may be asked to operate under. But if you do, the ship must implement extensive verification of ship stores. This could include a requirement of verifying 100% of anything being brought onto the ship. Prepare to restrict or suspend the handling of ship stores altogether. If the threat is such that you can't be certain that the stores themselves may be of hazard to the ship or your crew, it may be necessary to abandon bringing them on altogether. And prevent ship stores from being loaded on board the vessel as a last resort. This may be a directive that comes from the contracting government, the port facility security officer, or your own flag state. Just as difficult as it has been for a ship to deal with a Level 3 security level, so too are the requirements serious on behalf of the port. The port facility delivery of ship stores under Level 3 must include, for example, complying with instructions issued by emergency response personnel that may well be at the port because of the significance of the threat. You have to ensure the cooperation with all emergency response personnel as well as ship personnel as you try to cope with this elevated risk. And finally, be prepared to restrict or suspend delivery of all ship's stores within part or all of the port facility. Let's look at the protocols for a ship's handling of unaccompanied baggage. That can occur when, for example, a ship member, a crew, or passenger arrives at a ship having left behind their baggage at an airport where it was lost by the air carrier, and it arrives at some later date at another port. Ship security measures must be established to ensure that passenger and crew baggage and personal effects are appropriately screened and secured after being accepted by the ship's staff. Port facility security measures must ensure that passenger and crew baggage and personal effects are appropriately screened before being allowed within the port facility. Now, bear in mind that it is the port's responsibility to screen and search all accompanied baggage. They're in the position to best do this, and the responsibility falls on their shoulders and not the ship. Now, the ship's handling of unaccompanied baggage under Security Level 1 includes the requirement that the ship ensure that up to 100% of unaccompanied baggage is screened and searched. This has to be done in cooperation with the port. And use scanning and/or detection equipment, which may include X-ray, electronic, or mechanical devices, and/or canine units to effect such searches. When we look at the port facility's responsibilities for handling unaccompanied baggage under Security Level 1, they must ensure that up to 100% of the unaccompanied baggage is screened and searched. Devices may be intentionally placed to match its context as a means of disguise, such as a toolbox in an engine room. People involved in the conducting of searches need to be acquainted with some places where weapons, dangerous substances, and devices can be concealed. Some of these are behind a removable medicine chest, inside radios or recorders, in cargo containers, in ventilator ducts, storage tanks, inside heater units, above or behind light fixtures, above ceiling and wall panels, cutouts behind bulkheads, pictures, toilets, etc., false bottoms in clothes closets, inside wooden clothes hangers that have been hollowed out, inside rolled socks or spare socks, hollowed out molding, ducts, wire harnesses, railings, fire extinguishers, fire hoses in compartments, access panels in floors, walls, or ceilings, behind or inside water coolers, behind and under wash basins, behind toilets, in ventilation ducts and heaters. For a bomb search, here's one approach. It's called the 4-step search protocol. Step 1 is the first sweep. The individual in charge determines how space should be searched. The space is then divided in half. The search covers everything resting on deck up to hip level. Search back and forth towards each other. Step 2 is the second sweep. Here you search items in the space from the hip to the top of the head. Begin at starting points on opposite sides and search towards each other. The search usually includes hanging pictures, built-in cases, and table lamps. Step 3 is the third sweep. Search height usually is then from the chin or top of the head to above the head, including the ceiling. The search usually covers mounted air conditioner ducts and hanging wall fixtures. Step 4 is the fourth sweep. Here you search false or suspended ceilings. You search flush or ceiling mounted fixtures. You search sound or speaker systems. You also search electrical wiring and structural frame members. Remember to mark the space when the search is completed so that others don't feel it necessary to research that area. The port facility security officer and the ship security officer should be able to identify the characteristics and behavior of a suspicious person without consideration being given to their ethnic or racial background. Such so-called profiling is uniformly rejected by law enforcement agencies around the world. When looking for potentially dangerous individuals, you should look for cues to suspicious behavior. These cues could include inappropriate clothing for the weather or activity, conscious or unconscious readjusting of the clothing, unconscious checking for a weapon or a device that the person may feel is being revealed. Suspicious bulges in clothing that might actually reveal a weapon or a device. And many include an X-ray photograph to show how these weapons might appear if placed in luggage and pass through a scanning device. The first of these is a key knife. What could otherwise just be mistakenly taken to be a key on a key ring actually conceals not only a razor-sharp knife, but also a handcuff key. This is not something that most people would want to have on a keychain. Belt knives are also becoming more common. In this case, the knife is actually part of the buckle assembly, and to the untrained eye would appear to be a regular belt buckle. However, when removed, such as the Bowen belt knife shown here, you have a double-edged, razor-sharp knife that can be used in an offensive fashion. In this example, we have a necklace knife. What looks to be a piece of jewelry is indeed a stainless steel composition knife that is razor-sharp. Here, a keyring knife looks very much like an ornament that would be found on any keyring. However, concealed within the ornament is not only a knife, but also a pair of shears or scissors. And here, a push dagger that appears to be an ornament that would be carried also on a lanyard, perhaps as a necklace or a keychain. This leaf knife is by an unknown manufacturer. It's of a plastic and metal composition, and inside the ornamental leaf is a razor-sharp knife that could be used very easily as a weapon. Cubitons are used in martial arts. They apply pressure to pressure points on the body. This one is unique in that inside it conceals a dagger. Here's another keyring knife with a two-piece plastic handle. Quite unusual is this crucifix knife. The manufacturer is unknown, but inside of the crucifix is a cleverly concealed knife. In this case, you have a NASCAR helmet, which is an ornament for a keychain. Contained within the helmet is a knife that again could be used as a weapon. This is a ninja keyring. You can see this is where you would place your fingers between the two probes, and in a fight, this could be a devastating weapon against the eyes, face, or other parts of the body. Here is a pepper spray keyring. Manufactured in Brazil, it ejects a red pepper spray. It's very unlike most that you would identify as a pepper spray device and could easily go undetected in an X-ray or other physical security search. Here you have a keychain ornament that looks to be a silver dollar, but contained within the silver dollar are two razor-sharp knives. This Delta pen is also made of a metal composition. It looks like an ink pen, but when opened exposes a knife blade. Here's an example of a walker sword. We've seen cane swords before, but this looks like an ordinary walking cane, the sort that might be provided by a hospital. The expandable shaft can be removed from the handle to expose a long knife blade. Here's another example of a cane knife. And here you have a cane sword. Manufactured in the United States, it looks like an ordinary cane. The handle unscrews to expose a sword blade. Here's a sword umbrella. In this case, you have a standard folding umbrella, the handle of which pulls free to expose a 10-inch steel spike. This would be very difficult to detect, even with an X-ray. Now we're getting into some of the more obscure but very dangerous weapons that have come to light recently. This is a carbon fiber knife. Its composition is plastic, therefore it's invisible to a magnetometer or a metal detector. Concealed on a person, perhaps being tied to their leg or carried in a back pocket, unless a physical search were to be performed of that individual, this knife would probably make its way through any screening point. We also have what are called tool cards. These cards are the size of a credit card and contain within them several knives, screwdrivers, flashlights, and other tools, but they can easily be missed even in a hand search. This is a box cutter of the same sort that was used by the hijackers in the 9/11 attacks on the United States. These box cutters, which were legal at the time to be brought on board a plane, were used with devastating results. The hijackers first cut the throat of one of the flight attendants in order to get submission of all on board. Then, claiming to have an explosive device, They then commandeered the aircraft and used them as weapons of mass destruction against the World Trade Center and the U.S. Pentagon in Washington, D.C. This is a
history and current trends in maritime terrorism.
Terrorist organizations have historically attacked maritime targets as a means of furthering their political goals. From the 1961 hijacking of the Portuguese-flagged PV Santa Maria to the hijacking of the Italian-flagged Achille Lauro to the numerous maritime attacks by the Sri Lankan Tamil Tigers since the 1990s, widely publicized maritime terrorism incidents have drawn immediate concern and attention. The October 2000 attack against the USS Cole demonstrated the destructive capability of contemporary maritime terrorists. However, analysis of maritime terrorism shows that it is not new and that it differs little, if at all, from terrorism ashore or in the skies. In fact, maritime terrorism occurs in many of the same forms and methods perpetrated ashore. For example, in October 2002, the Limburg-style attack used explosives that had been found in the same types of attacks that Al-Qaeda had used in Africa and elsewhere. And again, the methodology was the same. Use people that are willing to go up in the explosion so you leave no witnesses behind. Use explosives that can be easily put together wherever you happen to be operating. And do it in such a simple fashion that you leave very little chance to any type of mistake. And again, one of the hallmarks is that either people are going to be killed in the operation, or they're going to be so far away from the operation that they don't stand the chance of being captured by intelligence services and later potentially become witnesses to the state. The Al-Qaeda attack against the MT Limburg perhaps documents that an approach from the sea may be the present-day path of least resistance. The attack killed one Bulgarian crew member, discharged over 90,000 barrels of oil, and destroyed the ship. Abdul-Razim al-Nashiri, a close associate of Osama bin Laden and one of the top 10 al-Qaeda leaders, was arrested as he was fleeing Yemen for Malaysia following the CIA's Predator Hellfire missile strike November 3, 2002 on a car carrying 6 key al-Qaeda terrorists. You may recall that there was an American citizen in that car as well who was later determined to be an al-Qaeda operative. This had the effect not unlike turning on the lights in your dorm room when you were in college and watched the cockroaches scatter, because what happened is after that attack they knew full well that every al-Qaeda operative in Yemen was going to look for a place to hide. And indeed, they were scouring the borders to find people that were attempting to leave Yemen after that attack. Al-Nashiri was one of the principal targets of that. Al-Nashiri, who was al-Qaeda's director of operations in the Gulf region, has been giving CIA interrogators important information about a series of devastating attacks he was orchestrating against U.S. and Western shipping to the Persian Gulf and Red Sea. Those plots included plans to fly hijacked aircraft into U.S. and coalition warships and attack shipping with scuba divers and remote-controlled boats, according to sources that have been involved with the interrogations. A U.S. intelligence official has said that al-Nashiri gave investigators names of terrorists he personally recruited for these missions, as well as other important operational details. He was captured with a satellite phone and laptop computer that could yield even more information, sources have said. The FBI issued a number of recent alerts about shipping as a result of his interrogation. The severity of the attack against the Cole and the Limburg, coupled with reports of numerous attacks by suicide boats of the Tamil Sea Tigers against Sri Lankan naval forces, has prompted serious examination of terrorist maritime attack capabilities by the world community. This history of terrorist and maritime attack of particular interest to the U.S. Coast Guard has been the potential for terrorist assaults against a cruise vessel, and that's perhaps not difficult to understand. With over 5 million Americans traveling on cruise ships and ferries, making calls in over 200 ports around the world, it makes many opportunities for terrorists to find that most vulnerable portion of the cruise infrastructure where they could potentially lay a trap against either the ship, the port, or indeed persons that happen to be on shore excursion. These numbers could result in a significant terrorist event if an opportunity were to arise. Let's talk a little bit about the maritime terrorist threat in the United States. There is concern that domestic and international groups may take advantage of the events of 11 September to advance their agendas. The availability and ease of procurement of materials, for example, small boats, chemicals, etc., and freedom of movement in the United States make the threat plausible. This is a quote from Admiral James Loy, who at the time was Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard and is now heading up the Transportation Security Administration. And at this time and at other times where we've spoken to him, he himself has said that he believes one of the most significant vulnerabilities that we face is our maritime industry, both ships while at sea and in port, and the ports themselves. U.S. terrorist groups fall into three categories: right-wing, left-wing, and single-issue or special interest. Right-wing organizations include racist, patriot, and militia groups. Left-wing groups embrace traditional leftist revolutionary philosophies as well as anarchy. Single-issue terrorism involves groups or individuals who may identify with either end of the political spectrum, but who are only concerned with a single issue, such as animal rights, environmentalism, or abortion. While all of these categories represent threats, it is single-issue terrorism which appears to be on the rise. The majority of right-wing anti-federal government individuals or groups are not an active current threat to commercial or government maritime activities. There are many vulnerabilities inherent to the maritime arena that could be exploited by these groups. The emergence of the militia movement, for example, the constitutionalists, the free men, and patriots in the 1980s and 1990s, raised concerns with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies as a minority of militia groups and/or individuals posed a significant problem. Literature on these groups has mentioned sabotage of transportation infrastructure, including rail and port facilities, as a means of attacking the U.S. government. Past militia targets have been federally controlled rather than private property. In the 1980s and the 1990s, there were several notable cases of domestic right-wing terrorist groups planning to attack maritime targets. In 1984, white supremacist Robert Matthews, who was the leader of an organization called The Order, was killed while federal agents attempted to arrest him. After his death, plans were found detailing his terrorist group's intentions to attack ships in Puget Sound. In Georgia, in 1995, 3 members of the militia group were convicted of attempting to blow up bridges. Over the last decade, a number of social issues have attracted radical elements that form militant core groups whose agendas include the use of violence as a tool to achieve their goals. This gives you a good example of the type of vessels that we're now facing with those various maritime activist operations, and there's no mistaking that this is not a pleasure craft. This looks more like a military craft. Animal rights, the environment, and abortion are all issues which have spawned the creation of such militant groups. In 2001, the FBI estimated that an eco-terrorist group, the Earth Liberation Front, was responsible for $37 million worth of property damage over 4 years. Targets of eco-terrorists have included government agricultural research projects and private sector targets. In 2000, the U.S. Coast Guard arrested animal rights activists and seized a vessel after attempts to disrupt the Macaw tribal whale hunt off Washington's Olympic coast was taking place. Several protesters were injured during the confrontation after U.S. Coast Guard vessels were compelled to stop vessels from endangering a vessel carrying Macaw tribal hunters by shouldering them away. The increasing willingness of eco-terrorist groups to engage in violence to achieve their ends and the increased number of incidents attributable to these groups suggests the possibility of a larger maritime focus in the future. Since each of the issues commonly associated with single-issue terrorism remains controversial, the threat from such groups will remain constant and may be expected to grow. Attractive targets for such groups include whaling vessels, chemical carriers, seaborne nuclear fuel shipments, and ships transporting timber and lumber products from primary forests. Let's talk a little bit now about foreign and international terrorist groups. Persons associated with international terrorist groups, both members and sympathizers, and state sponsors of terrorism, as designated by the State Department in the United States, reside throughout the United States. Several of these organizations, including Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Lebanese Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and Jamaat al-Fukra, have well-developed infrastructures in the United States, including Chicago, Boston, Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C., Tampa, Dallas, and Miami. Their U.S.-based activities include fundraising, recruitment of new members, weapons training, bomb making, robbery, extortion, counterfeiting, criminal activity, and operational planning. A small by these terrorist groups. In general, arms smuggling is most prevalent in Colombia. They're smuggled through ports in both the Caribbean and Pacific coasts. The maritime smuggling routes into Colombia are augmented by maritime transport to Venezuela and Panama, with further transshipment to the FARC and ELN via land means. go-fast and fishing vessels commonly used in the South American drug trade are also used to move weapons. So you're seeing a cross-pollination between terrorists and those individuals that are involved in drugs. And as we know from FARC, which started off as a political movement to overthrow the government, a Marxist-Leninist movement, it's really now become just a paramilitary criminal conspiracy.